Imagine you are pushing against a wall with everything you have. The wall does not move. Your muscles do not noticeably shorten, yet inside your body something very real is happening. Your muscles are working, your nervous system is active, your blood pressure changes, and your arteries are responding to the sudden demand. That is the basic idea behind an isometric hold. Your muscles produce force without repeatedly moving a joint through a range of motion. Think of a wall sit, plank, or static squat position. You may look almost motionless from the outside, but underneath the skin, your cardiovascular system is anything but still. When a muscle contracts strongly and stays contracted, it can compress some of the small blood vessels running through that muscle. Picture those vessels like tiny flexible tubes passing through a sponge. As the sponge is squeezed, the tubes can become partially compressed. Blood flow through the working muscle may therefore become more restricted while the contraction is being maintained. Your heart, however, does not simply stop responding. It senses that the body is demanding force and increases its effort. The sympathetic nervous system becomes more active, helping raise cardiovascular output and blood pressure. This is one reason a hard isometric hold can make your heartbeat feel stronger even though you are barely moving. Now comes the interesting part. Your arteries are not passive pipes. Their inner surface is lined with specialized cells called endothelial cells. These cells constantly monitor the mechanical forces created by moving blood. They can sense changes in pressure and the frictional force produced as blood flows along the vessel wall. During an isometric contraction, blood flow and pressure are changing in a very different pattern from what happens during ordinary rhythmic movement. Some vessels may be compressed during the contraction. When you finally release the hold, those vessels can reopen and blood can move through the previously compressed muscle more freely. That transition matters. It is almost like briefly squeezing a garden hose and then releasing it. The pressure and flow pattern change dramatically. Your arteries experience these mechanical changes, and the endothelial cells detect them. But there is an important distinction. This does not mean that 4 minutes of holding a position somehow scrubs plaque from your arteries or instantly repairs damaged blood vessels. The body is much more complicated than that. The useful idea is that exercise creates signals inside the cardiovascular system. Muscular contraction changes pressure and blood flow. Blood flow changes the forces acting on the arterial wall. The endothelial cells respond to those forces by adjusting vascular behavior. So, when you hold a position and your muscles begin to burn, do not think that nothing is happening simply because you are not moving. Your muscles are generating force, your nervous system is responding, your heart is adjusting its workload. And your arteries are constantly sensing the changing environment around them. That is the fascinating part of an isometric exercise. The movement may be almost invisible, but the internal cardiovascular response is not. Here is where an isometric hold becomes especially interesting. Imagine holding a heavy suitcase perfectly still. For those few seconds, your muscles remain tense. You are not lifting the suitcase higher, and you are not lowering it. From the outside, almost nothing appears to happen. But inside the working muscles, blood vessels are experiencing changing pressure and flow. Then you stop. You release the tension, and suddenly blood can move through the muscle more freely. That transition, from strong contraction to relaxation, is one of the most important moments to understand. During a hard isometric contraction, the muscle can compress small blood vessels within it. The longer and harder the contraction continues, the more significant that temporary restriction can become. Meanwhile, your cardiovascular system continues trying to deliver blood and oxygen to the tissues. Your heart rate and blood pressure can rise as your body responds to the demand. Then you relax the muscle. The mechanical compression decreases. Blood vessels that were being squeezed can reopen, allowing blood to flow through the area again. This can create a noticeable change in local blood flow, and your arteries can sense that change. The inner lining of your blood vessels is made of endothelial cells. Think of them as an incredibly thin biological control system coating the inside of your arteries. They are not simply there to form a barrier. They are constantly monitoring the environment around them. One of the things they detect is shear stress, the frictional force created when blood moves along the vessel wall. When blood flow changes, shear stress changes, and when shear stress changes, endothelial cells can respond by releasing chemical signals that influence the behavior of the surrounding blood vessel. One of the most important signals involved is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide acts, in simplified terms, like a message telling the smooth muscle surrounding an artery to relax. When that happens, the vessel can widen, reducing resistance to blood flow. This is why the relaxation phase of exercise is so interesting. The body is not merely switching a muscle from on to off. It is moving from one cardiovascular environment to another. During contraction, vessels may be compressed and blood pressure may rise. During relaxation, blood flow can increase again, changing the forces experienced by the vessel wall. But we should be careful with the conclusion. This does not mean that one 4-minute isometric session permanently transforms your arteries. Biology does not work like flipping a switch. A single exercise session produces temporary responses. The potential long-term benefits come from repeated exposure over time, combined with appropriate exercise, recovery, sleep, nutrition, and overall cardiovascular health. Think of it like practicing a language. One conversation does not make you fluent, but repeated practice teaches your brain how to respond more efficiently. Exercise can work similarly. Repeated changes in blood flow provide repeated signals to the cardiovascular system. Over time, regular physical activity can support healthier vascular function, so the surprising part of an isometric hold may not be the 4 minutes themselves. It is what happens when you let go. The moment your muscles relax, blood flow changes. Your arteries sense the mechanical difference. Your endothelial cells respond. And chemical signals such as nitric oxide become part of the conversation between flowing blood and the vessel wall. The hold creates the challenge. The release creates the change. And repeated cycles of that challenge and recovery are part of how exercise communicates with your cardiovascular system. Now we come to one of the most fascinating characters in this story, nitric oxide. You can think of nitric oxide as a tiny chemical messenger that helps your blood vessels respond to changing conditions. It is produced by the endothelial cells lining your arteries, and one of its important jobs is to help regulate how wide or narrow those vessels become. Why does that matter? Because the diameter of a blood vessel has a huge effect on how easily blood can move through it. Imagine trying to push water through a narrow drinking straw. It takes more effort. Now imagine using a much wider tube. The same amount of water can move through more easily. Your circulatory system has its own version of this principle. When blood vessels relax and widen, resistance to blood flow can decrease. When they constrict, resistance can increase. Nitric oxide is one of the signals involved in telling the smooth muscles surrounding the blood vessel to relax. So where does exercise enter the picture? Remember what happens during an isometric hold. You contract your muscles without repeatedly moving a joint. A strong contraction can temporarily compress blood vessels inside the working muscle. At the same time, your cardiovascular system responds to the physical demand and blood pressure can rise. Then you release the contraction. Blood flow can increase again through the previously compressed area, changing the mechanical forces acting on the vessel wall. One of those forces is shear stress. The friction generated as blood moves along the endothelial surface. Your endothelial cells are sensitive to this mechanical environment. When they detect appropriate changes in blood flow, they can activate pathways involved in nitric oxide production. The nitric oxide then moves into the smooth muscle cells surrounding the blood vessel and helps trigger relaxation. It is almost like a 3-part conversation. Blood flow changes. The vessel lining senses the change. Nitric oxide helps communicate the instruction to relax. This is one reason scientists are interested in the relationship between exercise and vascular function. Exercise is not only a way to make your muscles stronger, it also repeatedly exposes your cardiovascular system to changing patterns of pressure, flow, and mechanical stress. But there is an important warning against oversimplifying this. You may hear claims suggesting that nitric oxide automatically means clean arteries, or that a few minutes of exercise can rapidly remove arterial plaque. That is not what nitric oxide does. Nitric oxide is better understood as part of the body's vascular regulation system. It helps blood vessels adjust their tone and respond to changing demands, and that distinction is important. Your arteries are living tissue. They are constantly adjusting. When you exercise, your cardiovascular system has to match blood delivery with the demands of working muscles. Chemical messengers such as nitric oxide are part of the machinery that helps make those adjustments. The bigger picture becomes even more interesting when exercise is repeated. A single session creates a temporary physiological response, but regular physical activity repeatedly challenges the vascular system. Over time, this may contribute to healthier endothelial function and better regulation of blood flow, depending on the type, intensity, and consistency of exercise, and the individual's overall health. So when you perform an isometric hold, don't imagine nitric oxide as some magical artery cleaning chemical. Think of it as a conversation signal. Your muscles change the demand, blood flow changes, your endothelial cells detect the mechanical signal, and nitric oxide can help tell the surrounding blood vessel, relax, open up, let the blood move. That tiny chemical message is one of the remarkable ways your body turns physical effort into a cardiovascular response. 4 minutes sounds almost too short to matter. We are used to thinking that exercise has to be long, exhausting, and complicated before it can produce meaningful changes. But the cardiovascular system does not measure exercise with a stopwatch and say, nothing counts until 30 minutes. Even a short bout of physical effort can produce immediate physiological responses. The important question is not simply how long you exercise, but what your body is being asked to do during that time. An isometric exercise creates sustained muscle tension. Instead of repeatedly contracting and relaxing through movement, you maintain force in a relatively fixed position. A wall sit is a simple example. Your legs may barely move, but the muscles are working continuously to maintain the position. As that contraction continues, several things happen simultaneously. Your muscles require energy. Your nervous system increases its activity. Your heart responds to the demand. Blood pressure can rise. And blood flow within the working muscles can be altered by the sustained contraction. When the contraction ends, the cardiovascular environment changes again. The muscles relax, compressed vessels can reopen, and blood flow can increase. That is why a short isometric session can be physiologically meaningful. But here is where we need to slow down. 4 minutes is not a magic number. There is no special switch inside your arteries that flips exactly at the 4-minute mark and suddenly makes them healthier. Your body does not work according to a simple countdown. The effects of exercise depend on many factors: the intensity of the contraction, the muscle groups involved, how the exercise is performed, your fitness level, your blood pressure, your age, your medications, and your overall health. And there is another important distinction. A short exercise session can create an acute response without necessarily creating a permanent change. Think about what happens when you walk up a flight of stairs. Your heart rate rises. Your breathing becomes faster. Blood flow is redistributed. Your muscles demand more oxygen. Those changes are real, but they do not mean that climbing one staircase permanently transforms your cardiovascular system. The long-term benefits come from repetition. You challenge the system, recover, and then challenge it again. Over weeks, months, and years, regular physical activity can contribute to improved cardiovascular fitness and healthier blood pressure regulation. That is where the real power lies, not in one 4-minute session, in consistency. This also explains why you should be careful with extreme interpretations of short-duration exercise. If someone says, hold this position for exactly 4 minutes and your arteries will be cleaned, that is far beyond what the physiology supports. Arteries are complex living structures. Their health is influenced by blood pressure, cholesterol, smoking, diabetes, physical activity, diet, genetics, age, and many other factors. No single exercise can erase all of those influences. So what should you take away from the 4-minute idea? Think of it as a small dose of cardiovascular stress and adaptation, not a miracle treatment. A properly performed isometric exercise can challenge your muscles and cardiovascular system even when your body appears almost motionless. The resulting changes in blood pressure, muscle blood flow, and vascular signaling demonstrate something important. Exercise does not have to look dramatic to create a physiological response. 4 minutes can matter because your body responds to the quality of the stimulus, not merely the length of the workout. But the real lesson is even simpler. Do not chase a magical 4-minute shortcut. Use short bouts of appropriate exercise as pieces of a larger, consistent movement routine, because your arteries are not transformed by one heroic workout. They respond to the repeated conversation you have with your body day after day. When most people think about exercise, they picture the obvious things: bigger muscles, stronger legs, a faster heartbeat, better endurance. But there is another part of your body being trained every time you exercise, one you cannot see from the outside. Your blood vessels. Think of your cardiovascular system as a vast transportation network. Your heart is the pump, your arteries are the highways, and your blood is the delivery system carrying oxygen and nutrients throughout the body. But highways are not useful simply because they exist. They have to respond to changing traffic. Your arteries do something remarkably similar. They continuously adjust their diameter according to the demands of the body. When a muscle needs more oxygen, blood flow has to increase. When conditions change, vessels can constrict or relax, and the endothelial cells lining those vessels help coordinate many of these responses. This is where exercise becomes more than simply burning calories. Every time you move, your cardiovascular system experiences changes in blood flow and pressure. Your muscles demand more oxygen. Your heart pumps harder. Blood moves through different regions of the body at different rates. Your blood vessels have to respond. An isometric hold creates a particularly interesting version of this challenge because the muscles remain under tension without large movements. A sustained contraction can temporarily compress small blood vessels inside the working muscle. When you release the contraction, blood flow can change rapidly. That changing flow creates mechanical signals at the vessel wall. The endothelial cells sense those forces and participate in the regulation of vascular tone through chemical messengers such as nitric oxide. In other words, exercise is not simply training the muscles to produce force. It is also repeatedly asking the cardiovascular system, can you deliver blood where it is needed? Can you adjust pressure appropriately? Can your blood vessels respond to changing flow? That is why the long-term lesson is much bigger than 4 minutes. A single isometric session is not going to clean your arteries. It is not going to erase years of unhealthy habits, and it should never be treated as a replacement for medical treatment when treatment is needed. But regular physical activity can provide repeated opportunity system for your cardiovascular system to practice responding to stress. And practice matters. Think about a thermostat in a house. Its job is not to keep the temperature permanently fixed. Its job is to sense changes and make adjustments. Your cardiovascular system is much more sophisticated, but the basic concept is similar. Conditions change constantly, and your body must keep adjusting. Exercise gives that system repeated opportunities to adapt. This is also why consistency is more important than chasing spectacular workouts. You do not need every exercise session to leave you exhausted. You need appropriate, repeatable physical activity that fits your abilities and health status. Over time, regular exercise can support cardiovascular fitness, blood pressure control, circulation, and vascular function. And that brings us back to the humble isometric hold. You may be sitting against a wall, holding a plank, or maintaining another static position. From the outside, it can look like almost nothing is happening. But inside, your muscles are demanding energy. Your heart is responding. Your blood pressure is changing. Blood vessels are adjusting. Endothelial cells are sensing mechanical forces. And chemical signals are helping coordinate the response. That is the bigger lesson. You are not only training the muscles you can see. You are also challenging the biological systems that keep those muscles supplied. Your arteries are living tissue, constantly responding to the world around them, and every appropriate bout of exercise gives them another opportunity to practice doing their job. So do not think of exercise as something that simply makes your body look stronger. Think of it as a conversation with your entire cardiovascular system. The muscles speak through demand, the blood carries the message, the vessel walls listen. And over thousands of repeated interactions, your body learns how to respond more effectively. That is far more interesting than the idea of a magical 4-minute workout, because the real power is not in 4 minutes. It is in what you consistently do with those 4 minutes and what you build from them over time.